Hi, welcome to Conflict Story, where we bring you the best and most fascinating stories just for you. Let's dive right into one of those stories. It begins like this.
Rain needled the lake like 1,000 tiny nails, and my cabin door cracked open so hard the hinge screamed. She didn't knock. Karen Sloan, blonde shellacked into place, raincoat that cost more than my boat, pushed in with two stocky patrol guys from the Homeowner Association, and a phone already rolling. Illegal meeting, potential bribery, she sang, voice bright as broken glass. The camera swung from my face to the man across my table, the State Attorney General, Henry Caldwell, hands folded, eyes cold. My lamp threw a sick yellow circle over the map between us. Red lines traced shoreline. Little X's marked gates on public access. My heart thumped once, twice. You won't believe what she grabbed next. She hooked the corner of the flannel tablecloth and ripped it back. My old fishing map slid. The flash drive I'd tucked under the edge glinted, 1 stupid second out of place, and Karen's manicured hand snapped it like a lure. "Evidence secured," she chirped. Her guys spread out, shoulders wide, that gym-bought confidence. I smelled wet wool and lake mud. Henry's jaw flexed. He didn't reach for the drive. He didn't reach for me. He just stared as if I'd lit the match. "Say it." Karen shoved the phone near my chin, rain dots on the lens. "Say you tried to influence a state official." I stood too fast, chair clawing the floor. "You stormed my home," I said, "and that's my property." My voice sounded like it used to after away games, dry, tight, too late. Henry set his palm up between us, politician calm. "Everyone take a breath," he said. "This is getting out of hand." Funny thing is, it already was. Have you ever watched your own life get framed by someone else's camera and knew you were losing in real time? Let me rewind 30 seconds, then 30 years. I'm Matt Hayes, 56, carpenter's hands, knees that ache in rain, a man who used to shout on a football field and now talks to an empty cabin. I bought this place after the divorce, after the worst day on the water 5 years ago, when I couldn't pull my boy back into the boat fast enough. Water keeps score. I come here to listen. I fix what I can. I keep the rest in a drawer. Here's what happened before the door blew open. Henry and I go way back to guard weekends and cheap coffee. He texted he'd be in the area, and I told him I had questions about the Homeowner Association's special shoreline preservation fees. Public ramps closed for repair. Chains across old paths. Signs that moved like shadows. My young neighbor, Lucas, skinny, kind, new baby at home, had whispered that Karen was funneling money to quietly buy out lots and cull anyone who didn't fit the new lake culture. I said I had proof tucked away. I said I needed a gut check. Maybe I said I still trusted him. Maybe that was the real crime tonight. Back to the room. Karen lifted the flash drive like a trophy. "Call the chair," she told one of her men. "He'll want to hear how our little agitator entertains state officials with maps and goodies." She planted her hip on my table, right where my son's old fish towel sat, and smiled for her audience. The phone screen glowed my own face back at me, older, angrier, a man people step back from at gas stations. "Stop recording," I said. "You're in violation of community safety," she said. "You made threats about tearing down our safety gates." "Safety?" I laughed and hated how it sounded. "You chained off the public launch for 3 months because the lock was sticky. You installed cameras to scare kids away from the fishing steps. That's control, not safety." Henry coughed a politician's cough. "Matt, we need to keep this civil." I looked at him. He looked away. That hurt more than the camera. Have you ever watched a friend choose the quiet road while your house caught fire? Here's what happened next. Karen backed toward the door, still filming, rain spitting on her phone. "Gentlemen, we're done here," she declared, and then tossed over her shoulder. "Oh, and check your local group in 10 minutes. She left the door hanging open behind her, wind slapping it, the good lamp flickering. The cabin breathed damp, old pine and cold coffee. Henry exhaled. "You shouldn't have called me here," he said softly. "I called a man I served with," I said. "A man who told me once he'd rather lose a race than sell his spine." He didn't flinch. Maybe that was honest, too. "Delete whatever copies you have," he said. "Walk away from this. These folks love a fight. Don't give it to them." "They already took it," I said. He nodded once, small and sad, and slipped past me into the rain. I watched his taillight smear red on the wet gravel. I watched the door swing until I shut it, hand on wood that knows my weight. Then the phone started to buzz, texts, dings, a rising swarm. I clicked the group I usually avoid. There was the video already. Karen's stream, bright and self-righteous, my cabin framed like a crime scene. He attempted to bribe the attorney general, she wrote beneath. A man I've waved to at the hardware store commented, "Sell that shack and spare us the drama." Another, "Men like that ruin neighborhoods." A laughing emoji in a row, like fence posts. You ever felt the room tilt and it wasn't the floor moving? I stepped onto the porch and the rain washed some of the heat from my face. The lake was a sheet of hammered tin. Across the inlet, Karen's lights were a golden dress no one could afford. On the gravel below my steps, fresh tracks I didn't make. Bottles clinked in the dark. Then the smell hit me. Rot. Fish. Rot. I walked down with my flashlight and found my dock littered with plastic bottles stuffed with dead baitfish, their mouths open, eyes dull coins. Spray paint licked one plank, sell and go. Red looked black under rain. Here's the part where the story should say, I called someone. I didn't. The number I wanted to call had already driven away. "Matt," a voice hissed from the path. "Lucas, hoodie soaked through, eyes big. I saw the live. I wasn't part of this, I swear." "You okay?" I asked. He swallowed. "They told me if I keep talking to you, they'll reevaluate my exterior permit. We need to sell, man. Jenna needs the hospital 10 towns over. We can't get stuck." There it was, the pressure gauge, turning. "I get it," I said. And I did. Sometimes survival looks like a handshake with a bully. Have you ever had to choose between courage and keeping the lights on? He rustled, small in the rain. "I'm sorry," he said. "I gotta go." He went. I tied a trash bag over the dock sign and scooped fish with a snow shovel until my wrists ached. The lake coughed them back. I didn't cry. The rain did that for me. Let me back up to the day the water took my son. Wind turned without warning. The bow bounced like a drunk. He laughed at first, then he didn't. I missed his hand. That's the frame I carry, every day, always at the edge of the lens. Tonight I could smell the same iron taste of adrenaline. My chest tightened as if the lake put a fist there. Not again, I told nobody. Not again. Here's what I decided. If Karen had my flash drive, then I needed something she didn't know I knew. The rumor was she kept important things in a steel box welded under her pier. The one with blue lights she flicked on for guests, so the water glowed like a resort brochure. A kid down the road, Dylan, skinny, always in a hoodie, drone buzzing over the cove, once bragged to me about helping install cool tech for her. Kids talk, men listen. So, at midnight, I slid my John boat off the mud and let it nose through the rain. Oars creaked, my breath smoked. The lake met the sky at a seam of fog. Karen's house was a warm jewel on the bank. Her aluminum dock was a bright grin. I tied off under the far side, slid into the water, and the cold hit me so hard my teeth rang. My hands found splintered piling. I went down. Time behaves different underwater. Sound becomes a hum. Your heartbeat is a drum you can't turn off. I groped along the beam until my knuckles knocked steel. There. Padlock. My lungs ached. I wedged a flathead from my back pocket into the corroded latch and twisted until pain bit my forearm like wire. My vision pinpricked. I thought of my boy's knuckles under the surface, the flash of his wristband. I almost shot up then. I didn't. The lock gave like an old tooth. I kicked for air, and a light stabbed the water from above. Voices. "Who's there?" I broke the surface under the pier, pressing my cheek to cold boards, breath like knives. The light swung closer, a cone of white cutting rain. "Get a camera," a woman's voice. Karen's. Of course she had her own camera pointed at the lake. "Thief," she called. "Vandal." I rolled, hauling the steel box into my chest, and willed myself to be small. The pier groaned with footsteps. "There," a man yelled. The next sound surprised me. A loud splash 2 pilings over, and then, "Hey, over here!" A kid's voice. Dylan. He dropped to his belly and shoved his hand down between the beams. "Take it," he whispered. "Take it and go." I stared up at a wet jawline and acne. "Why?" I choked. "She made me scan stuff," he muttered, teeth chattering. contracts, emails. She laughed about you. I thought it was cool until it wasn't. Just, don't tell my dad. He shoved again. Come on, that's the kind of mercy you don't argue with. I hugged the box, kicked, and slid the way I came. A halogen beam sizzled the water behind me. Get security, Karen's voice escalated. Call the sheriff. I made it to shadow, to mud, to my boat. I lay there a second, lungs scraping, rain in my ears. Have you ever felt your heart climb back down your throat and sit heavy in your chest again? That was me. I rode with one arm, box on my knees, home a darker smudge in a dark world. Inside the cabin, I set the steel box on the table and stood dripping on old pine. My fingers shook too hard for the first try. Second try worked. The lid popped. Inside, paper. Not just paper. Copies of checks from Shoreline Preservation to shell companies that smelled like cheap LLCs. Lists of problem homeowners. Screenshots of group messages where Karen joked about starving out, the boat folks. Then the gut punch. A folder of emails titled Caldwell. I clicked Henry's name, cool, clear, over back and forths with Karen. Matt Hayes is nosing around. Best to keep distance. If he makes a scene, I'll have to publicly condemn. My name on their tongues like a seasoning they didn't want, but would use anyway. It landed with a dull thud inside me. I sat. The cabin hum was the only witness. I wrapped my bleeding knuckles with the towel that used to dry a boy's hair. The edge of it still smelled like summer and fish scales. I let my head fall back against the log wall and stared at the ceiling stain shaped like a hawk. I didn't move for a long time. Here's the human part you might not admit out loud. I almost quit. I could feel the weight of their story hardening around me like cement. The comments, the old friend stepping back, the neighbor slipping away. I whispered, "I'm tired," to nobody, and the word fogged in the lamplight. Have you ever been that tired? The kind that isn't in your legs? My phone buzzed again. A message from Lucas. They're coming by tomorrow to sign off on our exterior so we can list. Please, stay out of it. I stared at the text for a full minute. Then my thumb hovered and typed, "I'll help you sell clean." I erased clean. I sent, "I won't cause trouble." I lied to a good man. I hated that. Here's what she didn't know. Tools are just tools. A lock is just a dare. And vanity is a lever if you know where to set the fulcrum. I didn't have the law on my side. I didn't have votes. I had a kid with a conscience, a neighbor on a deadline, a boat that leaks a little, and a lifetime of knowing that bluster hides fear. Karen's weak spot was simple. She needed to be seen as perfect. I made coffee at 3 a.m. that tasted like wet bark and mapped it in pencil. We wouldn't take her to court. We'd take her to the mirror. Lucas needed a perfect showing to a city buyer. Karen craved being the center of any emergency. Those two threads could twist. By morning, the rain turned to a nervous drizzle. The lake smoked soft. I ran into Dylan on the path, hoodie up. He kept his eyes on his shoes. "You didn't get that from me," he said, meaning the files on her cloud he'd also given me access to. He'd texted it at 2 a.m. with a skull emoji he probably regretted. "You're not in this," I said. "You're just a kid who likes drones." He kicked a pine cone. "I'm not a kid," he muttered, which is exactly what kids say. She's not good, Mr. Hayes." "I know," I said. "Go home." By noon, Lucas's driveway was lined with fresh mulch and borrowed potted ferns. Jenna had made cookies because decent people still bake for strangers. The real estate lady arrived, hair like a helmet, smile glued. "Our buyer's a corporate counsel from the city," she whispered. "Big money, be on your best behavior." "Always am," I said, and tasted the lie again. At 1, Karen took her daily promenade by the lakeside path, clipboard tucked to her chest. 2, patrol shadows. She wore white sneakers that never met mud. She didn't look at me. That was new. Here's what happened next. And this is where I ask you to stay with me. I had Dylan set a faux alert on the smart speaker inside Karen's screened porch. He'd configured her Wi-Fi months ago when he installed her camera, and she never changed the default. At 1:30, as Lucas's buyer toured the property line by the water, a calm male voice came from Karen's porch. "Notice, environmental inspection scheduled for tomorrow morning. Remove non-compliant floating barriers immediately. Failure to comply will result in on-site disposal. She froze mid-step, her chin lifted. She glanced at her phone, then at the lake, then whistled sharp. "Boys," she called to her patrol. "With me." You could feel the panic through her shoes. She hustled to her pier and began yanking at plastic chains and blue floats like a magician trying to hide the rabbit fast. One patrol guy waded waist-deep in jeans, cursing in his chest voice. Karen barked orders, hair frizzing, the clean image splintering under urgency. Across the fence, Lucas's buyer, the corporate counsel, had paused. He watched Karen pull illegal junk out of the water that, 5 minutes earlier, she would have called safety equipment. His mouth bent into a thin line. He turned to the realtor. "Is this common here?" he asked. The realtor's eyes darted like minnows. "We pride ourselves on order," she offered. The buyer shook his head. He took a picture. Not for social media, not for fame, for his gut. He looked at Lucas, then at me. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. Some truths carry themselves. Karen, soaked to the knees and panting, whirled at me. "Did you do this?" she demanded. I shrugged. "You talk a lot about safety," I said. "I figured you'd want to get ahead of things." She stepped closer, water slapping her calves. "You—" My pocket buzzed. A new message from Henry. 3 words. "Don't escalate this." I stared at it. Then I stared across the water at Karen's pier that looked like a rummage sale after a windstorm. The buyer tucked his phone away and quietly said to the realtor, "I think I've seen enough. Have you ever watched a mask slip in daylight? Not a fall, just a quiet slide? That was the moment. But if you think that's a win, you don't know how long a day can be." Because that night, in the blue light of my laptop, I opened Karen's cloud folder Dylan had unlocked and found the emails with Henry's name on them, found my name used as a piece on their board, found the line where he told her to let me burn and he'd stand aside. I am not a man who cries easy. I am a man who fixes. But when your wrench is your friend's voice, it doesn't fit the nut anymore. I put my bleeding hand in the towel and sat on the floor. The lamp hummed. The rain had stopped and the cabin felt too quiet, like after the last guest leaves awake. I whispered, "Kid, I'm sorry. I meant my son. I also meant myself." Here's what I did then, because sometimes the only way through is through. I sent Henry a single audio clip from Karen's files. Not the money, not the maps. Just her laughing, calling him an old coward, and bragging she could make any man dance. I added one line, "Don't worry, I won't embarrass you." I put the phone face down. I made the mistake of thinking that was the end of the night. It wasn't. Gravel crunched outside. A car door shut. The rain had left the world smelling like wet leaves and cold iron. Henry stepped into my doorway without knocking, suit damp, eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. He looked like a man who jogged through his own career mapped in rain. He closed the door gently behind him, then set something small on my table. Metal, clicked wood. "Key," he said softly. "Do what you're going to do." "Why?" I asked. He stared at the towel around my hand. He stared at the map. He didn't look at me. "Because you're not going to let this go," he said. "And because I don't want to watch you drown again." Silence sat down with us. We listened to the heater tick. We didn't talk about the guard or the time we got caught in a storm on that training lake, or the way he once told me he hated boats. We didn't talk about loyalty, because the word would have broken in the air. "Get out," I said finally, voice flat. "Before you make me forgive you." He went. The key sat on the wood, like a coin on a gravestone. What would you do next if you were me? Take the key and burn the world, or put it in the drawer and call it a night? I had one more play left, not in a courtroom, not on a feed, on water, in daylight, where lies look uglier. And if I was going to do it, I'd have to pay for it with the little trust I had left. If you're still with me, drop a comment. Tell me if you've ever had the wind knocked out of your life like that and still stood up. Because tomorrow, I was going to drag a secret out into the lake where everyone pretends not to look and make sure they couldn't look away. Morning came sharp and bright, the kind of light that makes every flaw show. The lake lay flat as hammered silver, and my cabin smelled like coffee and wet rope. I set the little key Henry left on the table, lined up the copies from Karen's steel box, then pushed everything aside. Today wasn't about paper. Today was about sight. Here's what happened next. I hauled my old John boat down the bank. the motor coughing like a smoker. I tied a coil of nylon rope to a row of blue floats and plastic chains, pieces I'd found stacked beside Karen's pier after yesterday's panic. I added empty milk jugs and a stringer of rusted hooks, all of it loud and ugly. Think of it as a necklace of every lie she'd dropped in the water. The rope bit my palms. The lake smelled like tin and algae and the first cut of spring. "Need a hand?" Lucas called from his porch, baby monitor clipped to his pocket, eyes shadowed. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a month. "Not this time," I said. "You just keep your door open. You hear me?" He nodded. "We got a second showing at noon," he said. "If this goes sideways—" "It won't," I lied again. Have you ever lied to protect someone and hated yourself for being the one to pull the string? I pushed off. The boat's nose kissed the mirror of the lake and slid. The junk train bumped and clacked behind me, a parade of plastic sins. Sun caught the wet rope and made it look clean. It wasn't. Nothing about today was clean. Let me give you the picture. Karen's place sits like a magazine spread, tiered deck, flag snapping, aluminum dock shining. She was on that deck at 10 a.m., glass in hand, talking to a pair of men in polo shirts and loafers who wouldn't last 5 minutes in mud. Investors, the rumor said. A private lake experience was her phrase lately, rolled out at wine nights. Funny how private always means you're not invited. I cut the motor in the middle of the inlet. The lake held its breath. Water slapped the hull, and a loon called once, like a laugh cut short. I stood up slow, the way you do when knees remind you you're not 20, and lifted the end of the rope. The floats and chains trailed out of the water, dripping, clattering, turning my boat into a stage. Karen stared. Her smile tightened 2 notches. "What are you doing?" she called, voice too bright for morning. "Returning lost property," I said, and eased the motor back to idle. The rope hummed under strain. The junk slid forward in a long, wet arc. I could feel 1,000 tiny eyes from porches I couldn't see. People pretend not to watch. They're watching. Here's what she didn't know. I had no intention of stepping on her dock. I wasn't breaking a single law. Public water, my boat, my rope. But if she wanted the mess gone before lunch, she'd have to touch it with her own hands. Pride is a trap you bait with a mirror. I pulled along her pier and tossed the slack over one of her pilings. The floats knocked like teeth. "Tie that off," I said conversationally, as if we were neighbors and not truce-broken soldiers. She took a step back. The men in polos stared, their hands tucked into their pockets like they'd lost something important and didn't want to admit it. "You can't anchor debris here," Karen snapped. "Debris?" I lifted a blue float with her Homeowner Association logo, painted neat as a signature. "Looks like safety gear to me. Wouldn't want it littering the lake." Her jaw clicked. "Remove it, now!" "Can't," I said. "Rope snagged." I tapped the coil around my cleat. "Tell you what, I'll wait while you clean up. That way it doesn't drift back." For a second, I thought she'd swallow it. Then the hard line in her mouth flattened to nothing. She kicked her white sneakers off with brisk little snaps and stepped onto the lower dock. "Boys," she called over her shoulder, without looking at the men from the Homeowner Association patrol. "Help me." "Ma'am," one of them said. He didn't move. She didn't turn. That was her mistake. She needed an audience to perform. She already had one, and it wasn't us. She waded into shin-deep water and yanked at the knot. The rope burned her hands. I could tell by the way she winced and hit it. "Get it off!" she hissed. "Careful," I said quietly. "Those hooks are sharp." She glared. Sun winked off the water into her eyes. She blinked hard, misjudged her step, and plunged one calf to the knee. The men in polos shifted. One checked his watch. The other pretended to get a call. "We'll regroup," he murmured, and they turned, not rudely, just away. That's how power leaves sometimes, not with a fight, with a shrug. "Don't you walk away!" Karen snapped, splashing toward them, rope in one hand, float banging her thigh. She looked back at me, hair slipping out of place. "This is harassment!" "No," I said. "This is housekeeping." She lunged for the cleat on my bow. I lifted the rope and handed it to her. She yanked. The trash necklace swung, slapped water, and sprayed her shirt. Gasps lifted and dropped along the shoreline like birds. A small aluminum skiff motored up from the south. Lake Guard, the volunteer fish and water folks. 2 older men with brown ball caps and shoulders like trees. Not cops, not bureaucrats. The guys who keep people from blasting wakes into nesting reeds. The lead man raised 2 fingers in greeting. "Morning," he called. "You folks need assistance?" Karen's smile tried to climb back onto her face. "We're just dealing with some illegally placed—" "Those are association floats," the older one said mildly. "Got the logo on 'em." He looked at me. "You finding trash, Matt?" "Bringing it home," I said. The second man scratched his chin. "Well, can't leave it in the water tied to a private dock." He glanced at Karen. "Ma'am, you want to clear your structure? You know, keep the channel open." She stared at him like he'd switched languages. No summons, no sign-off, just the lake's quiet rules, the ones you don't write down because they're older than paper. She made a choice then. Pride reached for her throat and squeezed. "Fine," she spat, and went at it like a woman tearing a bedsheet. Chains slapped, hooks clicked. She dispatched her patrolmen with shaky hands and sharper orders. For 20 minutes they wrestled with their own junk while the 2 lake guard volunteers floated, idling, hats low, saying little. A neighbor kid on a paddleboard drifted by and stalled, wide-eyed. Across the inlet, doors cracked open and stayed that way. Have you ever watched someone build their own dunk tank and then climb the ladder for you? She cut the last nylon twist with a pocket knife and tossed the end onto my deck. It coiled like a snake between my boots. Her hair hung wet. Her breath came fast. The men in polos were gone. "Get off my water," she said to me, voice shredded. "Public water," I said, steady. "And I'm going." I eased the motor to life, the boat nosing back. The float slid off her dock and trailed behind me again, this time lighter, smaller, the work done. I didn't look back at her. I looked at the lake because I needed to. The sun had climbed 3 fingers up. The world smelled like wet cedar and metal. Here's the part you might not expect. It wasn't over. My phone rattled in my pocket. A text from Henry. "You made your point. Don't push it." Another from Lucas. "Buyer coming early." I tied up at my dock and began coiling rope with numb fingers. Dylan appeared at the edge of the bushes, hoodie up despite the heat. He kept glancing at Karen's place like it would bite. "You good?" he asked. "You did me a kindness," I said. "That doesn't make you safe." He shrugged, trying to look older. "My dad thinks I'm working at the marina. Don't tell him different." He hesitated. "She's gonna hit back, you know." "I know," I said. "You keep your head down." Have you ever had to let a kid walk away into the mess you can't clean for him? By noon, Lucas's driveway hummed again. Same realtor, different car. The new buyer stepped out, middle-aged, neat haircut, eyes that scanned and filed everything. He shook Lucas's hand, then Jenna's. Good manners. He moved like a man who fixed problems for a living and didn't enjoy them. Karen didn't stroll the path this time. She stood on her high deck, arms crossed, sunglasses on, watching. I could feel her stare like a chalk line across my back. The showing took them past the shared path at the lake. That's where I waited in my boat, anchor down, rope stowed. The water was glass now. Dragonflies stitched light in the reeds. I didn't speak. I didn't wave. I just existed. A quiet problem she couldn't edit. The buyer paused by the path marker. "Is the lake access public?" he asked Lucas. Lucas glanced at me. Then he looked at the sign. Old, hand-painted, faded. "It always has been," he said carefully. "Some people try to forget." The buyer nodded. He turned and looked square at Karen's deck. Sunglasses reflected her. Small. He didn't say hello. He didn't have to. He had seen enough yesterday, and this morning had drawn the line thick. They went inside. The air outside tightened, like it does before a storm. Here's where the floor dropped. 2 teenage boys from the association patrol came strutting down the path, chests up, phones out. "Private showing," one announced. "Path closed for safety assessment." Lucas stepped onto the grass, hands spread. "Guys, not today." "Orders," the taller one said, pointing his chin at Karen's house. I set my boot on the gunnel. This could go bad. The last thing Lucas needed was a scene. The last thing Karen needed was quiet. She thrived on command and panic. So I did the one thing I had left. I made it boring for everyone but her. I reached into the stern and pulled up the garland of floats I'd kept tucked under a tarp. I tied one end to the public path's old post, the one Karen hated, and with the other end still in my hand, I pushed off, dragging the rainbow of plastic across my bow toward her dock. The line cut a bright, wet curve through the water. It was a banner, a parade, a mirror. The patrol boys turned to watch, confused. The buyer stepped back onto the porch, drawn by motion. Even the realtor forgot her smile. "Ma'am," one of the lake guard volunteers called from the far cove, voice carrying. "Your dock is collecting non-compliant equipment again." Karen snapped. She bolted down her steps barefoot, hair wild, and splashed out to the lower platform. "Cut that rope!" she shouted at her boys. "Now!" They scrambled. One misjudged his step and went in up to his armpits. A little gasp rolled along the porches. Karen knelt, knife flashing. She swung for my rope. That's when the old cleat on her dock, a fancy shiny thing installed wrong for looks, not strength, ripped out like a tooth. Her knife hand flew. She tumbled forward, caught herself on her palms in 6 inches of water, and froze. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. You could see the thought cross her face. Not about me, not about rules, about the investors, about the picture, about the woman who never got her sneakers wet, now dripping in front of half the lake. That was the break. Not loud, not viral, just a crack in marble you can't polish out. She stood, knees muddy, breath hard, and saw the buyer on Lucas's porch watching her. For the first time since she took the chair, Karen looked small. She straightened and tried to smooth nothing. "This community is committed to safety," she said to the air. The buyer put a hand on the porch rail. "So am I," he said evenly, "which is why I don't buy into clubs that trip their own members." He turned to Lucas. "We'll talk numbers," he said. Jenna pressed a hand to her mouth. She didn't cry. Not yet. Karen retreated, back up the steps, dignity stitched together with threads too thin. The patrol boys sloshed after her, suddenly very interested in their shoelaces. I idled my boat toward open water, cutting the rope and letting the floats drift free so I could collect them later. The lake guard guys gave me a chin lift. Not approval, just recognition. The lake has a long memory. Here's what happened after. Henry resigned 2 months later, quietly, citing family reasons. Karen stopped hosting wine nights. The association dissolved the Special Shoreline Fund with a bland email. Lucas sold his house clean at a fair number. Jenna sent me a photo of their baby strapped into a car seat with the caption, "Closer to the hospital." Dylan left a drone on my porch with a note that said, "For your boat shots, no spying." He'd drawn a little fish in the corner. And me? I fixed the cleat on my own dock and left one of the old floats tied under the pier where I could see it when the water was still. I hung my boy's fish towel on a nail by the door, not to clutch in the dark, but to touch on my way out. I stopped hearing the water as a threat and started hearing it as a clock. It doesn't care if you win or lose. It just is. There's peace in that, if you can stomach it. I ran into Henry once in town, months later, by the feed store. He looked 10 years older and 5 pounds lighter. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "You dragged it into daylight." "I dragged it into water," I said. "Different thing." He nodded. He didn't ask forgiveness. I didn't offer it. Sometimes the price you pay for standing up is the quiet places you can't go back to. He walked one way. I walked the other. The sun felt good on my neck. Have you ever realized you were still standing even after the people you leaned on moved? It's not triumph. It's something smaller and stronger, like a beam that was always there, behind the drywall. If this story hit a place you don't talk about much, tell me, drop a comment. Tell me if you've ever had to outlast somebody who looked bigger than you, but was mostly air. And if you're sitting on a secret, thinking you need a courtroom to be heard, maybe you just need a boat, a rope, and the patience to let someone else pull their own mask off. Here's my last truth. I didn't beat the Homeowner Association. I didn't topple a queen. I set a stage and stood back while pride did the rest. The win wasn't loud. It was honest. It cost me. It changed me. I sleep now. Some nights I wake and put my hand on that old towel, and I don't see a drowning. I see a boy laughing, water sparkling off his shoulders like coins in the sun. Then I make coffee, step outside, and watch the lake tell the same old story in 1,000 new ways. That's enough.